Hey Sasha, how are you?
I am here, but I no longer see the stage.
What's that?
She
There
doesn't
we
see
are.
us.
Oh, shit.
Perfect.
Okay, good.
Perfect.
Well, welcome everybody to the next session. The only thing keeping you from lunch, so bear with us for a few minutes. To kick off, it's great to see Health Innovation Summit here in Charlotte. I've been part of kind of the startup investor scene here in Charlotte since dating back to 2014, 2015, and it's really awesome to see it spilling over into the healthcare innovation space as well, right? So really excited to talk about what the healthcare innovation space looks like, how do those startups get funding, et cetera, et cetera. So with that being said, would like to welcome our panelists again, Sasha, John D, and Betsy. Give a quick little intro. John, we'll start off with you since you're closer to me.
Yep, somehow I ended up in the middle.
There you go.
So, John D. Cooper, Vice President of Finance at Novant Health, and my primary function is running the operations of Novant Health Ventures, which is our wholly owned sort of private investing arm that invests both as a limited partner in other venture capital funds focused on healthcare, as well as some direct investing. And I'll apologize. I'm originally from Eastern North Carolina, and when I get nervous about speaking, the dialect tends to come out a little bit more. So if it all of a sudden sounds like a foreign language, that would be why.
Yeah. So I can understand him fully, even though I'm from Western North Carolina. And it's interesting, 3 out of your 4 panelists are actually North Carolina natives, which is really unusual in Charlotte, in particular in this space. So, and Sasha is a Tar Heel at heart. Is that right, Sasha?
Yeah, I love Charlotte. Yeah, although no longer reside there full time, but yes.
Yes. So I'm Betsy Walsh. I'm the Senior Vice President for Joint Partnerships at Novant Health. And I function in what I call our other weird arrangements. This is where we do things other than investing. We do invest in companies that we partner with. We have creative partnerships, whether joint ventures where we have shared equity, whether we're functioning in a multi-faceted arrangement for what we call like a contractual joint venture. I do the things that are a little bit unusual, and have been doing that with Novant for about 20 years, but in this capacity for 3 years. So really excited to be here.
So awesome. Thanks, Betsy. Sasha, just reintroduce yourself to the new folks to the room, I guess, right? You've been here for a while.
Yes, hi. I had moved from Charlotte to Switzerland during COVID, and but I do still engage in the Charlotte healthcare innovation community, as well as US and European innovation community. I'm basically a digital health entrepreneur turned investor. As a technologist, I specialize in application of artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT, and blockchain to healthcare and life sciences spaces. And I started my investment path a few years ago after my last exit, and now have had an opportunity, I would say, to structure deals where I lead or follow or bring other VC firms from the US, from Europe, from Asia to follow an investment. But I specialize in early stage, pre-seed, seed, pre-series A, series A, digital health, digital therapeutics startups.
So awesome. So really excited to have y'all. I mean, again, my name is William Bissett. Also run a podcast called the Charlotte Angel Connection. We've interviewed almost 137 folks in the space in Charlotte. So it's great, mainly around startups and funding startups. So it's a natural kind of transition for us to kind of get started today. We've talked about this a little bit in advance, as you would expect us to. And I want to start maybe on the innovation side and build into the funding side of the conversation today. And so one of the things that we were having a conversation about, and Charlotte's newer in the healthcare innovation space, is what's the perspective from the health system, maybe here in Charlotte more so than elsewhere, of starting to work with innovators, right? So how do y'all see innovators from y'all's seat here in Charlotte and continuing to grow forward?
That's the only thing.
Sure. So I'd start by saying we really consider ourselves innovators ourselves. And actually, we use the word, sometimes use the word healthcare system, but we're really more of a healthcare network. And I think if you think of us as a healthcare network, you'll understand how we're a little bit different. So I'm going to ask you guys a little bit, what do you think of when you hear the word healthcare system? And be really honest. We're going to do some word association here. So what are some of the one-word things that come to mind? Because we were asked about how health systems view innovators. Start with, yeah. Bureaucracy. I thought that might be the first one. Any other words? What come to mind? And you can't work for Novant Health to answer this question. So someone who doesn't work for Novant Health, when you hear healthcare system, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Complexity. Yeah, that's fair. Process-driven. Absolutely. And maybe a complicated process-driven. Yeah. So my goal today, and I think John D's goal today, is to have you think of other words. We want you to think of partner. We want you to think of potential funder. And we want you to think of innovator. So we want you to think of those things. Well, and also customer. So the way that Novant Health as a healthcare network, to me, system implies we have to own everything, and we think that we have the right idea for everything in healthcare. We realized 20 years ago at Novant Health, we don't have the right answer for everything. And so we're looking for innovators, whether it's clinical, whether it's operational, whether it's technological. We're looking to discover the innovators within and empower them. We're looking to partner with others who may have a slice, either it's adjacent to our core business or it's a part of our core business that someone else knows how to do better. So when we think of innovation, what we're looking for is someone to help us deliver on our mission better, either in our core markets or something adjacent. So that's the goal, is to change your mind from bureaucracy and complicated processes to a partner, a customer, an innovator, and potentially a funder. So I'll turn it over to you, John D, as the funder.
So it's interesting, though, I think that we're sitting here in Charlotte, which a lot of the growth, first of all, was in textiles, which I think we're sitting in an old textile mill, follow on by banking, right? And so as we think about where healthcare is right now, maybe back yourself up to where banking was in the early 90s. And all the innovation that's gone through with banking is now a lot of what we're seeing in some ways in healthcare. And that opens up a lot of opportunity, obviously, for those of us in the investor space as well. So I think we're in the early innings from that standpoint, which is great for the investors, because that means that there's a lot of new stuff that's going to continue to come down the pipe, and you've heard a lot about that in the other forums this morning.
Sasha, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of positive trends that we're experiencing now in the healthcare globally, and especially in the United States. I believe that in the United States, we have one of the most mature, the most innovative ecosystems. I've decided I'm going to speak mostly about positives today, and I'm going to tap into my entrepreneurial career. So a couple of positives is that now systems are writing checks sometimes, right? But they are writing checks. So just traditionally speaking, systems and healthcare in general is very risk averse. So there's a lot of caution, and that's understandably so, because a mistake would cost a human life. So it makes sense. And I think, though, there are ways to take the caution, but yet to facilitate innovation. And I think a couple of things that could do so are, well, one is an opportunity to co-create with the system, or an opportunity to partner up with the system, whether it is you doing a pilot, or whether it is, again, there is a co-creation opportunity there, and then there is a shared IP. And another important component that drives innovation is funding, especially funding for early stage startups, which is the space I come from. I think it's quite nice as an entrepreneur to see, and as an angel investor today as well, because sometimes I put together deals on the funding side, and I do tap into my in my network in the provider space. So I think it's unusual, and I do hope that this trend of co-creation and investment into early stage innovation continues. I think that would ultimately, back to Charlotte, since I've lived there for so many years, I think that ultimately that's what would allow our local Charlotte ecosystem to prosper. I think we have the players. I think traditionally Charlotte is associated with banking, but we have several healthcare providers, including two very, very large ones like Novant and Atrium. And I think it's wonderful to see them literally participating, taking risk aside with entrepreneurs and trying to facilitate deployment of innovation.
It's that's a great point, and it kind of brings me back to a conversation I had with an entrepreneur from out west, probably 7 or 8 years ago. They said the difference between Charlotte and San Francisco is in San Francisco, a company will open up their doors and they'll bring in entrepreneurs and they'll tell entrepreneurs there's everything that's wrong with their business model. And then they'll invite them to come back and try to solve for those problems, right? And if they do it, then they start to buy their product because it's curing their ills, so to speak. No pun intended in the healthcare space. I'm sorry for the bad joke. But how does the system encourage that innovation and entrepreneurship as Charlotte's healthcare scene kind of starts to pick up speed?
I think part of that is, one, what you started to see a lot of healthcare systems do with areas like mine. You have a lot of healthcare systems now that have some sort of internal venture funding arm, and it varies. You'll have some that are more traditional like us, where they're looking to externally fund operations. You have some that are also good at incubating operations inside of their systems and then spinning those out. And then others that will also partner. You think a lot of if you look up in the triangle where there's a lot of the university and university healthcare systems, they'll also find ways to partner with other funds to help do that as well. And I think part of what Novant Health is starting to do with the team that Betsy's part of with Novant Health Enterprises is, again, how do you commercialize areas within your system that you are really a leader in, and there are other systems or networks that can benefit from that. So I think having that capital, that dedicated capital, that's not competing with building brick and mortar or hiring additional doctors, is what's really going to sort of help things continue to accelerate, because there is a knowledge base that's there that just needs the financial capital behind it to help really grow.
Yeah, just to build on that, we did create a company, a separate division, an independent division called Novant Health Enterprises. It may change names. I'm not sure what the name will be, but it was a separate division created intentionally and with a purpose to accelerate innovation, to accelerate working with creative partners, both inside our organization as well as outside our organization, for clinical, operational, and technological advances. Healthcare faces some seemingly intractable problems. We can't solve it alone. That's why we're a health network, an integrated health network now, because we don't own everything. We want to partner with those who have solutions, both internally and externally.
So, Sasha, what are ways for entrepreneurs and innovators to find out the problems that they can help solve?
I'm sorry, the question is to find problems or to fund problems?
No, find it right now, right? I mean, entrepreneurs are always, yeah. We'll get to funding in a second.
Yeah, it's about funding. So my experience, unfortunately, just sort of kind of backs up a story where there is still a need for funding early stage startups. I had left multiple times Charlotte, beautiful Charlotte, including San Francisco, and Atlanta twice, and a few other places, because I was seeking funding. And I also was seeking partnership to do a POC. So in the healthcare space, there is always this chicken and egg, right? So the system doesn't want to let you deliver value until another system had done so. And as an entrepreneur, you're facing a dilemma. Well, who can be this first system? And so as an entrepreneur, you tend to seek a state like California where there is an open door policy, more or less, not literally, that some large systems have, and they have money as well. So, that's just kind of a reality. Although I see, again, from my earlier comment, that is changing, and I think it's positive. And I think there is another way to answer this question too, again, since I am an angel investor. So as far as, if I'm wearing that hat, I think there is a need for partnership. And healthcare system as a whole in the United States and globally, it's you tend to get to know the large players after you participate for a while. And I think there is a need to, at times, to expand the network and maybe bring other funding players, whether it is, maybe angels or smaller funds, into some of those deals that will ultimately move the needle. So I would say, in short, there is a need for partnership, I would say, at large. So again, if you've been playing very well with funds out of California or out of New York, maybe there is a fund or a local angel group, which we do have in Charlotte, actually. There is a really good one out of Lake Norman. So can I sort of put it out there? Maybe there is a missing opportunity there, right, for partnership.
Yeah, no, there's two types of funding, right? There's the funding that comes in terms of revenue, and then there's the funding that comes in the form of capital, right? And they need both. I mean, they need the partnership because that confirms that somebody's buying that product, and then they need the second thing, which is they need the capital so they can continue to expand on it. So as companies start to gain that revenue, gain that traction, and grow and expand, in a smaller market like Charlotte, how important is it for the networks to help those companies find funding, whether it's through a fund like y'all or outside funding, hopefully from within the state or even outside the state, right? How much is it the systems, the network's responsibility to help those companies get the funding they need to grow?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, I think if you go back several years and you look at venture capital, corporate venture capital investing, right? And it was, I'm going to allocate capital to funds A, B, and C, and my goal is to get returns, and that's simply it. Then it transitioned a little bit into, allocate capital, get returns, and let me get some information back that I can share without the system. I think now, and I think a lot of the venture funds as well have realized this, at least the ones that I deal with, is that the information flow is becoming much more of a two-way street, because it's still, I want to get the information back, but it's, I'm seeing these particular companies that are early stage, and I want to introduce them. Part of that is just being a good limited partner, right? But part of that is also, let me get a different set of eyes on this that can help evaluate that company, determine, does it have longevity? Is it something that's worthy of getting funded? And then, we can introduce them to this. By the way, if it's successful, because I've now introduced it to this fund, they can then go and introduce it to a whole nother set of health systems. So it helps accelerate the growth of that company as well. And if I put investment capital in there, well, that's going to accelerate my returns also.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on the customer side, I'm not with our sourcing team, but they are phenomenal. So when you're looking for funding for revenues, get to know the healthcare networks, sourcing teams, understand their processes, understand their criteria, know that it's not, we serve a mission, and to serve that mission and deliver on that mission, we have to have processes that we go through to accredit and make sure that someone who will be sourcing for us is going to be able to meet what they're promising to deliver, because we owe that to our patients, right? And we owe that to the community. But we are looking to source from a variety of different large companies, small companies, local companies, and in particular, we've repeatedly won awards for diversity and supplier outreach. So we're looking to work with lots of different companies, size, and lots of different ownership structures. As far as partnership goes, we do again. We have a mission. We're looking to partner with different types of companies. Sasha mentioned it is a chicken and an egg. How do you find your first healthcare network partner? How do you find your first one who will let you partner? We are the first healthcare system, healthcare network that is partnered with at least one healthcare delivery alternative. That was in our weight loss management system. So we have weight loss management clinics called Core Life Novant Health. We're their first health system, their first health network partner. We were willing to do that because they had a fantastic delivery model that was different than what we were doing by ourselves. So we were willing to be the first. In other things we're getting ready to announce, we'll be the second, but the largest healthcare network. So we are willing to try different things. We are willing to partner with others and to try something different. And sometimes we actually like it when we're the first. So don't be afraid to approach a healthcare system and say, hey, you can be our founding partner.
If I may,
Absolutely.
I would love to add an angle just to within the conversation. What I had earlier in my career witnessed a number of times is I'm sitting at the table and fundraising, and the VCs I'm speaking to don't understand they either lack the technology understanding, or they lack the regulatory understanding, or they simply don't understand the business models or like how healthcare buys solutions, right? And so I found myself, again, early in my career, because at some point you start interviewing, right? Once you figure out what's what, convincing people that not only it is about the ROI of the solution, but the solution is timely. And now there is a flip side for me. I'm on the other side of the table. So I have been fortunate to be on the board of the world's largest impact fund, which does have a healthcare vertical. It's my second year now with J&J Ventures. And what I'm finding is a positive trend. So again, in the VC world, traditionally you have brilliant people with financial background. And they don't know sometimes firsthand what it's like to build a solution, so that they lack technology background, or they don't have an operational perspective because they've never actually worked for a health system. But they are with money and they are evaluating solutions that healthcare system would buy. So I think there is a need for VC world to also open up the subject matter expertise to those who come from entrepreneurial background, with operational background. It's incredibly important, again, for someone, let's say like Betsy, to join the fund. Her perspective would be very valuable because she understands how healthcare buys solutions. Or like me, right? I have technical and business background to contribute. So there is a trend, though. I think it's a positive trend as we talk about collaboration and we flip that question to VCs. So there is a desire to expand the number of perspectives during deal evaluation, which I think will lead to ultimately better quality solutions that are being funded. Because now we are funding technology that actually makes a difference in the space versus technology with the sexy buzzwords like AI, ML, IoT, blockchain. Well, is this useful or useless in the healthcare space, right? So you've got to have that background to have an answer. Not just money, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I did a podcast interview yesterday with Bull City Venture Partners, and we were talking about what it means to be founder friendly. And as y'all kind of talk about this, it kind of brings that right back to space. So in the funding relationship, there's two aspects to it, right? Which is there's the money, right? Of course, they want the money because they want to grow. But there's the second piece to it, which is they need help and guidance along the way. And in y'all's space, I mean, you've all mentioned the regulatory and different issues that are around the healthcare space. So from a funding founder-friendly perspective, how does the network or the system, how do y'all help them? And how easy is it for them to come to y'all and not feel like, oh gosh, we're going to sound silly if we ask XYZ question? How do you help those entrepreneurs knock down those hurdles?
So I think we're very willing to help when it comes to articulating what's important in the healthcare space. Patients and quality first, absolutely. But there's always a catch. What we can't do is provide the expertise that you would get from a VC or from a PE-backed firm. We don't do startups. We don't have people within our healthcare system typically who have started a business. We want to partner with people who started with a business, but most of our partnerships, our really deep partnerships, already have VC or PE backing. So they're getting that business, to Sasha's point, they're getting that business, they're getting that how to scale expertise externally. We can't help with that. What we can do is layer on the knowledge from a healthcare delivery model. We can help put people in touch with clinicians who can help. How does this impact patients positively? The whole sort of startup, how to scale, you would get from the VC or PE backers. However, one thing we do is when you're talking about founder friendly, we're flexible. We don't need to be a majority owner. We don't need that. We can be a minority owner if it's a great idea, and especially that leaves some space to have the VC or the PE backer have their piece of the company. So don't think because you already have VC or PE that we wouldn't be interested then in some type of additional stake. We're good with taking a smaller piece to make sure you have access to that expertise as needed to scale.
Yeah, I think the one thing is we do have examples where we have worked with very early stage companies that, one of the main things, they may need data, right, for example. So I can think of one example that we're working on right now in the women's health space where they need data to be able to test an algorithm. And we were able to partner with them. And then while they were too early stage necessarily for us from an investor standpoint, we did have that network that we could then go to and say, hey, let's talk to X, Y, and Z funds. And it may be early stage for them, but then they have an angel network that they can, that's focuses on women-run companies, and they can introduce and help them with a bridge round. And so it's that continuing sort of trying to work on their behalf because you believe in what they're doing and you believe it's going to be the right thing for the patient. And at the right time, you can then step in from an investment standpoint as well.
Yeah. So kind of continuing down that path for a second, John, how do VCs or investors in general feel in going into investments where there's a relationship with a large network, right? Is that a friendly relationship? They view it as, to steal the term from the audience member earlier on, bureaucratic. How do they feel investing in companies where y'all are either involved or soon to get involved?
Yeah, so I think if we want to approach it from the angle of the funds that we deal with, right, they are always very interested to talk to us if they think that we have a knowledge base they can leverage. So whether we've had conversations with a company about being a partner with Novant from a commercial standpoint, whether they are a provider with commercial, and we will readily make our subject matter experts available to those funds. So if it's, for example, a behavioral health company, and they're looking at it, I know that I can go to my behavioral health team and say, hey, I've got Health Velocity Capital is looking at this fund. They know that company has also been talking to Novant Health. Would you be willing to spend 15 or 30 minutes on the phone and just give them your perspective? Absolutely. And I think that's the great thing about Novant, and you're seeing other health systems do it, making those subject matter experts available to help from a diligence perspective or from an introduction perspective as well.
Sasha, we'll let you go second on this one. I feel like I've kept you third the whole time, so I apologize.
I just want to weigh on that because it's not just about money. We're in the healthcare space. It's ever changing. And the importance of subject matter expertise is crucial. It could really make or break a startup, also from valuation perspective. Case in point. So we've had in 2021 was a phenomenal year globally as far as investment goes. So it was $57 billion that was invested in the space. And the US startups got $29 billion of that. And a lot of that funding went towards mental health. yes, we have an issue. I think we'll acknowledge we have an issue. There are a number of issues within the mental space we could be addressing with technology. But what we're seeing today is the space, a lot of startups, a lot of the unicorns were overvalued. And today, actually, about 1.4 trillion is unrealized gains as far as VCs are concerned. And a lot of the unicorns that we funded, overvalued in 2021, they basically are doing their rounds of very large layoffs in the space, which once again, I believe that if you have a diverse subject matter expertise at the table, when you're writing that check, when you're trying to figure out, is this technology truly groundbreaking? Just because it has the buzzwords there. But do physicians actually want to use it? Or is this patient friendly? And that requires, once again, that requires a conversation. I think that is my personal philosophy. So when I write a check, I don't just write a check. I join as an advisory member. My check is conditioned to that, because I believe that it takes a lot to get success in the healthcare space. I think it's, obviously I'm biased, but I think it is the most complex industry there is. And it's not just about money. You have to have a network of end users, right, within the provider or payer or whatever other spaces, right, to validate your solution. And you have to get those answers before you write a check. And I think we're seeing, especially like with my example, mental health, I think some of that expertise was missing, because we do see some deals that were overvalued.
No, really good point. Charlotte's, I'm from East North Carolina. John D's from East North Carolina as well. We were talking beforehand. You said, how come you're in Charlotte and not in Raleigh? Charlotte's a city that loves to compare itself, right? So it's always been, how do we compare against Raleigh? How do we compare against Raleigh? So let's leave Raleigh alone for a few minutes. How does Charlotte compare against other healthcare spaces from an innovation perspective? Where can we succeed as a city currently within our health innovation space?
I'd love to hear from Sasha with her experience in multiple cities. So, Sasha, I'm too biased.
I love Charlotte. Charlotte will always be home to me, and I am on the couple of boards because I'm very passionate about the community. I was one of the early pioneers in the space, and now there are many. So I think there is work to be done because, again, when
Thanks
I
for
look
staying positive there, Sasha. I like the positivity.
Access to funding and customers, I think Nashville does it really well. I think the community there is really tight. So as an innovator, you can come in, or as an angel investor, you can come in and easily plug into the community. And I think in Charlotte, this is so interesting. We have a lot of brilliant people, and we have people that could contribute funding, significant funding. However, my experience is sometimes that funding community locally is missing subject matter expertise in the healthcare space. They understand fintech more so than they would understand health tech. And which is why although I'm not physically there, but I haven't left, because I believe that we could do a lot, right? We're not utilizing the resources we have in Charlotte. Other systems, for example, is a prime, so I think there's work to be done, but I think, Nashville, Atlanta do a pretty good job. I think it's easy to get lost in Silicon Valley and New York. So you got to come in with the strategy. When I coach entrepreneurs, I say, no one is just waiting for you there with open arms. It's very competitive. And I think the benefit of Charlotte community is there are a couple of really good boards, including in partnership with RevTech Labs. And these are very open groups. So whether it is you come from with the funding, or you are an entrepreneur, you can join and you can collaborate. And I think that is a very positive trend. And I think that would ultimately get Charlotte on par with Nashville, or with Atlanta, or at some point with Silicon Valley as well. So I'm feeling positive.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing, about Charlotte is the desire to be investors has always been here. You think of some of the larger investors that focus on middle market, upper middle market buyout. And I'm thinking Ridgemont, Pamlico. You've got some growth equity here as well. It's just not exclusively healthcare. They will do healthcare investments, but they're different from an innovation in the VC and sort of the A, B, and seed type rounds that really need that type of capital to really accelerate from an innovation perspective. And I think that's, as Sasha mentioned, Nashville, Atlanta. I throw Austin in there too. You're gonna think about sort of the southern cities that have that, and they have more of those ecosystems. And then you think of other smaller southern cities that are trying to get there. I think of a Greenville, South Carolina, or a Charleston, some of the things they're trying to do. So I think Charlotte, there is work to be done. I think it needs to really continue to focus on that. But I think it can easily get there just because of the nature that there's a lot of folks that enjoy investment, enjoy being investors. And so that's a natural thing to do.
And I think too, when you have an industry that casts such a large shadow, so the banking industry and the fintech industry, I think that what is here in the healthcare investment space may be getting overshadowed and maybe larger than it gets credit for being. I don't know the answer. I'd be interested to get your thoughts. It's just when you have such huge success in the fintech industry, are we actually doing better than we think we are? We're just comparing it to the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we've had some good healthcare companies that have done great things, right? We really have.
And they're just not as big as the banks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Am I supposed to go to questions now? Sorry. No. So I can keep going for hours, but I'll open it up and let y'all ask some questions of the group.
Hold on, I have to run. Sorry.
Excuse me. As y'all look at investments, in my mind, you can simplify it into their innovations and investments you can make in things that will cost the healthcare system more. So there's a new device that the cardiologist can stick in to be a better pacemaker, just for simple, and it will get a payback because there's a code to bill for it and there's payment, et cetera. And my concern, obviously, behind that question is the rising total cost, and eventually someone has got to pay for those things. Or contrast that with value-based type investments that allow us to do a better job, possibly with less money, or lowering the cost. And particularly in that side, how do you calculate an ROI when you're driving down total cost of care potentially?
Yeah, so that's a great question because it's in one hand you're taking, in the other hand you're giving, right? I think the one thing that we have to think about from a healthcare perspective is, there's going to continue to be, as there is now, a lot of pressure from payers, and it's only going to get more and more and more. So don't disagree with you on is there a new pill, is there a new device, is there a new something like that? And that is an area that I specifically don't focus on. A lot of stuff that I do focus on is there a way that can make the patient get through the hospital more efficient, right? So that our nurses are spending less time charting and more time on care, and so that we can have our nursing population, which, if anybody's picked up a newspaper lately, is kind of under strain, but we can actually be more efficient with that population. And oh, by the way, they're less stressed because they're spending more time at the bedside. So in that way, I'm being able to do more with less cost. And so that's going to be better for the system and the patient.
So in that scenario, you're taking cost out of the delivery system, assuming a similar payment for the DRG that nurse, and so you increase your margin with the same revenues effectively.
That would be the ultimate goal, or at least be able to keep pace as the cost of that DRG comes down, right? so you don't have margin compression across the system.
But then that leaves us the funding. So you find efficiencies while still having optimum patient care. That then leaves you funding to pay for that new device, which can then have better outcomes, excuse me, which then decreases the cost of care overall. So I think it's an and ultimately.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. So this is where the subject matter expertise is really, really important. So it's not just the financial expertise where you look at the P&L or the projections and you're like, okay, if we sell 1 million of these devices, here's, an ROI. It is very, very important to start from clinical perspective. Like, for example, I can say this because we finished with the due diligence. So I have a new portfolio company. It's a blood pressure monitoring, and it has multiple other devices. It's quite unique. So if you don't understand the space from a clinical perspective, first of all, you will say, well, it's just another blood pressure monitor. What's so unique about it? But from the clinical perspective, when you look at the validation and you see that it is 35% more precise in measuring blood pressure, you see that it positively impacts the outcomes. Well, outcomes are, especially in the complex disease states, lead to, like, let's look at hypertension and diabetes, right? All over the world, doesn't matter where you are. These are the costliest diseases. So correctly identifying blood pressure, especially in outpatient setting, and for the device to be easy to use, could drive the cost of care to go up or down. For example, you could be prescribed the wrong drug because you're continuously not measuring your blood pressure correctly. And the only time it is measured correctly is when you get into the hospital, which is obviously costing the insurance now because a hospital visit, has a, specific reimbursement, right? And so on and so forth. So when I'm driving towards this, the answer to your question is not linear. There is always a cost component in the healthcare space. I like to say this. You have to either make money, save money, and all while keeping your customer compliant. So, and all of this goes with the value-based care desire to improve the outcomes and decrease the cost of care. So again, it is a complex question, requires a complex answer from clinician, from a technologist. You have to look at the total market opportunity, what competition is doing, and how overall it can impact cost and compliance ultimately.
I think I'm next. Can you hear me okay? One, I'd like to say thank you to John. I've been waiting for someone to use the term nurse all morning. And man, if it wasn't the finance guy, I'm a nurse. So I have spent the entire duration of the pandemic doing all the things that everyone has talked about today. So I figured out a way to provide at scale hospital level care at home. And figure out a way to get patients out of the hospital sooner with a whole team of amazing clinicians and nurses. But the problem is that we did it in such a manner that if you have great transitions of care, if you give a nurse like me to a patient, particularly a geriatric patient, and have that nurse navigate them across the system, across the giant gap that exists, we prevent a readmission. Almost, in my data, 91% of the time. What happens is the finance team will decide, we've drastically reduced the heads and beds. So how do you mitigate that risk? If you're going to innovate, if you're really going to innovate in a team of nurses and do the things you just said, how would you address that situation? And how would you carve out funding for something that's going to disrupt your system so greatly?
Yeah, so great question, right? Okay, so I decreased my ED emissions, but the problem is I decreased my ED emissions, right? So it's a great thing and it's a bad thing at the same time. And that conundrum faces it down the road. So it's not going to be an easy transition. I think it's something that's going to take time because you have to look at it eventually of, okay, does it mean that I have to deploy less capital on brick and mortar? Does it mean all of a sudden I need less heads? But think about this. In 1991, if you wanted to deposit a check, how'd you do it?
I don't know. I was 9.
I was a little bit older.
Sorry.
I walked into a branch. The gray hair kind of gives it away. I walked into a branch, filled out a deposit slip, handed them my check, handed them my deposit slip. They said, okay, great, you can have your money in 3 days. What do now? You pull out your phone, you take a picture of it, you send it in. So do you still need people on the teller line? Absolutely. And by the way, I'm not equating tellers and nurses. I know better than that.
You can. We're service people.
But yes, and that is more of my point, right? You are at the forefront of the customer relationship, right? But now think about all the stuff that if I go to the teller line still, all the stuff that the folks behind the teller line can do, because they are not constantly depositing checks and depositing cash every single day. And by the way, I've actually worked behind a teller line before. So I think that's I wish I had a crystal ball. I probably wouldn't be sitting here if I did. But I might be sitting on a beach in the Caribbean or something like that. But I think that's how we have to think about it, right? You're going to have ups and downs, and you're going to have situations where, okay, all of a sudden the revenue is not matching. But if we find a way to do it right for the patient, the other thing is, if we think about it from a Novant Health perspective, not a healthcare, a Novant Health perspective, okay, we'll end up attracting more patients, right? They may come in a different way because they know we have all these different capabilities. Atrium's probably thinking about the same exact thing, right? I would expect them to. So you might have a decrease somewhere. You're going to end up getting a pickup somewhere else. And oh, by the way, if my investment fund has then backed that company or backed that and we've spun it out, well, then hopefully I've also gotten a nice return on that, and that flows back into my coffers also.
It's absolutely, we recognize that there's a disconnect in incentives, and that's why we've separated out and created two independent divisions, one Ventures to fund and one Novant Health Enterprises to do partnerships that are thinking differently. So we have folks who are incentivized to think differently and help our system be prepared for what is here and what is coming. Absolutely.
So,
I have also perspective.
a quick one, Sasha. A quick one.
Sorry?
A quick one. We've got lunch. We've got lunch coming. So 30 seconds. Quick perspective.
Yeah, super quick. The question is brilliant. I think this question easily highlights the need to have nurses which drive healthcare forward at the table. So my quick take is continue doing what you're doing. Try to get involved with your leadership, maybe with the board. The board has to be open-minded. You have to bring in innovators outside, because you can actually look at the balance sheet and you can see, okay, so we're decreasing this revenue, but we're improving the quality of care in our community. Where else can we get the revenue from? Well, the quick answer here is RPM. There are billing codes, which were increased during COVID. So there is an opportunity to, again, reduce the readmission, maybe reroute some of this care to the home setting and still make money. But you have to be open at the board level, right? When you're looking at the balance sheet, to maybe add on some different services, right? That will make money while making the quality of health of your community better. But the question is brilliant.
No, it's a great question. Thanks to the panelists. Very vibrant conversation. Be remiss if I didn't say, when we talk about funding in any space here in Charlotte, the small funds out there make a difference. We've got Venture South here in town, which is a network of angel investors out of Greenville. We've got Charlotte Angel Fund, which is primarily a Charlotte-based angel fund here. We've got small VC funds like Dan's FinTech fund, and hopefully we'll have healthcare funds outside of it as well that help provide those early stage dollars. So seek those out, go to those meetings, ask questions, figure out how you can be an investor and participant in the innovation space. So anyways, thanks everybody. I'll go grab lunch.